Today on the podcast, our guest is Jen Weir, coming to us from Boston, Massachusetts. And Jen is the author and creator of the program and book, Essentially Free. Jen uses essential oils to help clear and deal with our emotional blockages, our triggers, and those things that are just holding us back. We need to deal with our emotions. If they don't, they will deal with us, and they will build up in our bodies, in our mind, and keep us from doing what we really wish to do, right? Which is to have a happy, successful life. I learned so much from Jen when I took her program, and today she really reminded me we need to just own our own shit. What happened to us, and how we dealt with those things and our traumas and our life and our background are all part of who makes us who we are. But we can't let those traumas affect us moving forward. We need to deal with them, learn to process them in a healthy manner, and so that we can move on and be happy and have a successful, happy life. That's just what we all want, right? Is to be happy in our own skin, to feel good about ourselves, to own our worth, and to be able to help other people in the way that we really want to. So I hope you enjoy the conversation with Jen today. I know I sure did. But I hope stay tuned and listen to our conversation with Jen Weir. Just a reminder that the information on the podcast is just that. It's for your information. It is not intended to replace advice from your medical team. I hope that we inspire you, however, to be your own health advocate, to do your own research, talk to your medical team, and find out what is best for you. This episode of the podcast has been brought to you by your unique fuel system. Clean your gut, energize your health, and fuel your passions. Find the foods that are causing your illness and which ones will fuel your success. Good food is not good for you if that's what is causing your health issues. For more information about the program, go to yvonneking.ca and book a free discovery call with me, and let's see if the program is good for you. Our next program starts on October 13th. If you are watching this on the replay, you can go to the website and send me a message, and I will let you know when the next program starts. So welcome to the podcast today, everybody. Today, I'm excited to have my good friend Jen Weir with us today, all the way from Boston, Massachusetts. Jen, it's such a pleasure to talk to you today. And Jen has such a unique gift. I think we all have beautiful gifts that God has given us. And one of Jen's beautiful gifts is helping people with their emotions and finding that path and understanding that we all have problems, we all have our days, but being able to give some people some really solid ways to help with their emotions. And I think that you're incredibly gifted in that area, as well as so many others. But today, that's what we're going to talk about. So welcome to the podcast today, Jen. Such a pleasure to have you with us.
Yvonne, thank you for having me. It is just a true honor to be asked to be on your podcast. And my goodness, what an amazing introduction. So praying that I live up to your words. Thank you very much.
Well, you do. And I think, and I know that you're very spiritual and you have a lot of of all the people I know, I mean, you have such incredible faith in both yourself and God and your provider, whoever that be for other people. Right. But it really guides you in your life. And I really honor that about you. I think that you just really live with what you feel true to you. And that is something that so many of us strive to do, right? Is just be ourselves and be loved for who we are. And those gifts that we bring the world, the way, just be authentically us.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, and I hope that for so many, because I love that you said that everybody has such amazing gifts and talents. And it almost pains me to see when people don't walk in that and they don't feel confident in who they are and who they were designed to be.
Yeah. And then we all that's part of, growth of ourselves. And that's the one thing that's amazing about doing personal development stuff, right? Is that you start to really find out who you are and what what you're here for, when you start to feel that purpose. And when you find that purpose and you really start to feel it and own it, then, things really change for you, right? And for everybody around you, because you have a whole new energy about you now as well.
Absolutely.
That's the journey. It takes the practice.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about you, Jen. Who's Jen Weir, and what do you do with yourself?
Well, it's, when you asked that, I thought, well, gosh, well, it's really quite simply, I am a mom of 5 children. That's pretty much, I guess that's not who I am. I mean, there's so much more, but that at this stage of my game, it somewhat defines my role and how I've come to do this work in emotions. As I was raising 4 of those, my oldest had gotten a diagnosis of cancer. And so that propelled me on to more natural health and wellness. And my research was really for them to save his life, to help us all heal from having that diagnosis. And so anything that I do from now on, it really reminds me of, I do it first for my children and then for the rest of the world. I grew up in California. I'm a military brat. Both of my parents were in the military. My dad was career, so I moved around a lot. And I've seen a lot of struggles and strife in the world, and that just continues to propel me into my passion. You mentioned that I'm here in Boston, and the things that I do really here and around the world, that's just what drives me. I mean, when you ask who I am, I'm somebody that wakes up every day thinking, who needs what I have? Who's praying for something that I can give them? I'm not everybody's cup of tea, honestly, and that's okay, because we don't always resonate with everyone. But if I am, I have something that can really benefit you should you need what I have.
Yeah, and that's a great point, right? And that we have to come to that point in our own lives that it's okay to just be us, and it's okay if other people don't get us and don't jive with us. That's totally good, right? But that shouldn't stop us from being who we are in our own heart. We just follow our own heart and be ourselves. And the people that need it to be in our lives, they will come into our lives. God will provide those for us and bring them to us, right?
Right.
I
Absolutely.
don't believe there's no such thing as happenstance or circumstance, right? There's a big plan overall, whatever you believe in, whether you believe in God or energy or the universe or Buddha or whatever, right? But that there's more energy involved in the earth, and people are put in front of our path every day and for a purpose. And it's up to us to decide what that is, and if we are going to continue our relationship with those people, right? And figure out what that purpose was.
Yes, 100%. Absolutely.
So tell us, what do you do in Boston? What made you decide to leave sunny Texas for the cold winters of Boston? I mean, it's not as cold in Boston as Alberta, but it gets pretty chilly there compared to Texas.
It does. And that was the one thing when we shared with people, oh my word, do you know how cold it is? And I was hoping we'd get snow like Alberta. And so far, no dice. So there's that. That remains to be seen. In 2016, I took a birthday trip every year not every year. When my children turned 13, we take them on just a one-on-one vacation to pour in, and it's such a pivotal time in their lives, right? And so my daughter and I, we chose Boston. We were living in Dallas. I had lived here as a child. We were stationed here at Fort Devens a couple of times, and I thought that would be fun. And we came here, and the moment the wheels hit the ground, we touched down, I was drawn to the city. And this has happened a couple of times in my life with people, with situations, and I can't even explain it unless it's happened to you. So I won't even try. It was just an inner burning. And I spent 4 days here just thinking and processing how I can convince my husband and my other 4 children to meet me here. We were going to live here, and I couldn't shake it. I came home, really almost distressed and distraught over the city, which, as I say it out loud, I sound like a complete crazy person, because I have yet to meet anybody who's ever had that drive and passion that I have. But again, going back to be who you are, I'm a passionate, driven person. And once I get a bee in my bonnet, there's no letting go until that vision is fulfilled and finished and complete. So about 2 weeks into it, I had a friend who said, have you ever seen the movie Spotlight? He knew a little bit of my background with emotional healing. I had already been dabbling in that, not dabbling, I had already been doing that work, I should say. I said, no, I hadn't. And so I watched the movie and I thought, that's it. I sensed the pain in the city. If you're an empath, you understand what that is. If you're not an empath, it may not make any sense to you, but people who are empathic really feel the pulse and the emotions of what other people are feeling, like it or not. You really have to cover yourself and understand what's yours and what's not yours. And when I was in Boston for the first time, I really felt not only their pain and what they walked through, but also that I could help them. I knew the tools that I had started writing a course on how to do this. And I knew I choose to use essential oils to do it, and the steps, the modalities, I could help them. In the movie, it discussed that for 30 years, there was this really a secret that was kept from the church at large here in the city, where there was a lot of sexual abuse, mostly among young boys, but it was covered up by the police and the church itself and was never stopped. And so what I realized then, so this came out in 2001, all of these children were now adults and living miserable, hard lives because no one ever believed them. That's part of my story too, that no one believes you and you feel like a crazy person. Fast forward, it took us about 2 years to get our finances together, and we had actually just bought a home in Texas. So that financially wasn't a wise choice to just then resell it 2 months later. So we waited and sold it. And then I love telling people we packed up we sold everything, by the way, because we thought we were going to live in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house with 4 dogs, a cat, and 5 children. I said, guys, this is going to be amazing. We're going to live in Boston. This is going to be wonderful. And this is why I'm so passionate about my faith, because I just thought, whatever come what may. But secretly, in my vision journal, I wrote down the house that I wanted. And Yvonne, you've not ever been to my home, but I live in a mansion on the beach in Boston. And it far surpassed what my vision was. And as we've been here now for 2.5 years, I see why we have this home. And so we sold everything except for my sack of oils and the knowledge that I had about emotional healing. And I came here looking to heal people. And so
I remember we were already Facebook friends at that time. And I remember seeing posts about your excitement of, oh my goodness, you can't believe it. Like, this house has just came across our path, and this is where we're going to live. And you didn't even know, you were talking about leaving, you're going to move, and you didn't even have any place to live. You had no place to stay, and you were already packed up and ready to go, and it's just, yeah, there's a big purpose, there's a plan for you, and everything just was put into place. And it's so beautiful. It was so touching to watch it from this end of your feed, right? And see all those things come in place, because there's a big purpose, and you're there for a real reason. And it became so apparent to me anyway, watching on this side. So it's so exciting to see how it all played out for you and all the work that you're doing there.
I love that you shared that, because, and thank you, because that is honestly, that's one thing that had been a struggle for me. And as I watch other people, it's a struggle for them, where it doesn't make sense to sell everything and pack up all your children with no prospect of a place to live. Understanding that it's quite expensive. It's about twice as much to live in Massachusetts as it is to live in Texas. And so it doesn't make sense. But that's not something that I really worry about. That's me. It resonates with my personality, and thank God my husband's, right? Because I've drug him on many an adventure, and it's always worked out in his favor and our favor. But I think for people listening and watching, many times, if you're like me and you have these dreams and you have these passions, I know that I can make a difference in this, whatever the situation is. You have to be true to that. I guard my dreams and my visions very carefully. That's part of my emotional health. It's part of self-care. When we broadcast, this is my big plan and this is what I'm doing, you open yourself up to all the naysayers and all the criticisms, because they're speaking from their fear. Mm-hmm. and their judgments. And I love that you've said, whatever you believe in, whatever you ascribe to. And that's what's hard, is when somebody really wants to believe in one thing and everyone's, oh, that's just dumb, or that's silly, or that's not truth. But if it resonates with you, what does it matter? Exactly. It's your dream. It's your vision. It's your passion. It's your belief system. Go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Follow your own heart and not worry about what everybody else is saying, because it'll all work out the way it's supposed to work out. Right?
Yeah.
And that reminds me of something in your book too that was really struck with me. And that is, well, I actually came back to a couple weeks ago, almost a month ago. I did something called oil mapping, and she uses the oils and she has all the blends out, and she muscle tested me to see what blends I needed. And then we applied them in order that she had in her intuition. And we got to an oil called Trauma Life. And she asked me if I had it at home. I'm like, yeah, well, do you use it? Well, no. Well, she said, well, why not? Well, because I'm saving it for somebody else will need it more than me. It's special. It's because I think there was a time when it was kind of hard to get.
Oh, yes.
Right. And so it was really special, and I don't need it because my trauma isn't that much compared to other people. And then someday somebody else is going to need it more than me. Right. And you talk about that in your book too, right? It's that we need to own our own trauma. It's okay. We just can't compare our life or our trauma or our experiences with other people's. If it was traumatic to us, and it's trauma to us, and we need to deal with it. Right. Just because somebody else maybe had some abuse issues doesn't mean that my trauma isn't just as important as theirs was, right? Because it's important to me and I need to deal with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that if nothing else stood out to you in that book, I've done my job. Because that's one of the things that I am so driven to teach people, is that when you look at the statistics of PTSD, let's say, it's I think it's something around 30% of the population. And this is just folks who are diagnosed. What that means is those are people who actually went to a doctor, a physician, somebody that said, yes, you have this based on your manifestations of how you respond to certain things. So many people just go completely unnoticed. They don't, like you, they don't do that because we qualify it. Mm-hmm. When you qualify trauma, what made me realize that is that my father, I was sharing with him about him that he had been in every conflict from Vietnam to Desert Storm and so many in between. And one day he was sharing that he'd finally started seeing a therapist. He had tried to commit suicide 3 times. Thank God it never stuck. But after that, decided perhaps I should see somebody. It takes a while sometimes for those military guys. And over the course of the time, he learned he struggled with PTSD. And he said, well, you know what that's like. You struggle with it too. My dad had known my story of different abuse and all of this. And it just stopped me in my tracks. I said, I didn't understand what he meant. And he kind of went on to explain. And I thought, if a man who has seen so much pain and so much hurt in his own life and in the world could see his daughter that having PTSD, I needed to do research and dive in. And in my years now of coaching, I see we do this qualifying. I was a hairdresser for 100 years. That's one thing I didn't share. I like to say that, but really it was only 25. And I would watch people do that to each other, and I thought, this is so sick and twisted we do as humans, that we downplay. I don't know why we do that. It's like we try to one-up each other on other things, but we downplay. We have this false sense of, well, it wasn't that bad. And I'm not even, to this day, I haven't figured that out. But really, once you can say, like you said, I'm going to own this. This was really hard. It's traumatic for me to experience fill in the blank. Okay, now I can rightly discern it and deal with it and move forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if you save your trauma life for a rainy day or for someone who really needs it, well, then you're screwed, really. I mean, come on, you're just going to keep stuffing it and not acknowledging it.
Exactly. And what, it's funny because since I've read the book, because I read the book over again on the weekends when we were camping, right? So I could remind myself of everything in it. And it really, in a situation what happened when my grandpa passed away, reminded me of that situation. And that was very traumatic for me. And I remember burying it and thinking like, why, you know, it's not that big a deal, right? But it wasn't. I'm 50 years old and that happened when I was 19 or 20. Obviously it's a big deal, right?
Absolutely.
And it was a situation just around the death, because I was in the room with him at the time. And you know, I've put it under the rug, right? And so it's time I need to deal with it, because it's not coming up by happenstance. It's coming up for a reason, right?
Yeah.
And then we just need to own those things, that those things have happened. It's okay. And it's okay to feel bad about it in however way it was. But it's not okay to let it fester in our lives, and hold us back from doing other things, right?
Right. And I want to touch on that if I can, because I know somebody will be listening or watching and say, well, why would I even want, what does it matter? Okay, sure. So I see I have trauma from this situation, but why does it matter? And I'll just expand it for a moment on what you said, because it holds you back. It creates triggers in your life that have nothing to do with the situation at hand, but has everything to do with some trauma in the past. And it really creates just a life of just getting by, a life of surviving. And as I'm seeing here in Massachusetts, there's just a spirit of misery here. They just don't know what they don't know. And you see it because they've never dealt with the trauma, and it's heaped and it's heaped and it's heaped. And eventually it's not a productive life. It's not a life worth living anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And once we start to identify it, then we can start to change it. But if we don't identify it, right, then we can't change what we don't know. So
Yeah.
you also, so we should talk a little bit about the book. Kind of skipped over a little bit. This is Jen's book, Essentially Free. She also has a program, Essentially Free, is by the same name. Is still calling it right? Which is fantastic. I remember taking that near the beginning when you were first developing it, and it was so helpful. It came to me in a time in my life that I really needed that. And it really helped me a lot. And I love the book because it's not a hard read for people. It's a fairly short read, but like you say in the book a couple different times, you need to read it 3 times because
Yes.
when you read, and it's like that with anything, it shouldn't be a competition about how many books we read. It's about how many books we study, how much we study that book and really get to learn and implement what we're learning from it. That's important, right? It's like Bob Proctor's read the same book for whatever it is, 40 years,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Every single day, right? But when we read it, you read it over, but then go back and read it again and then start applying and doing the steps that you talk about in the book. And you talk about quite a few different ways that you can use essential oils to help with this process. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that too. Why do essential oils help us with the emotional release?
Oh, that's a good question. So essential oils, I used to say, and I believe before I wrote the book, that you can do emotional healing and releasing without essential oils, because my audience is not just specific to oil users.
Mm-hmm.
Now I would emphatically say, no, you can't. You actually can't. And I'll fight you on that one, actually, because the science behind it is too compelling to think otherwise. And here it is. The science is, when you smell anything could be cookies, it could be bread, it could be peppermint, any of that, it triggers a memory. It just does. What happens is that aroma goes into your limbic system, right? Into the center part of your brain. If you slice the brain, if you slice it, you have a cross-section picture of it, you'll see that right in the middle. There's the amygdala, there's the limbic system, all in that. That is where your memories and your emotions are stored. That's where we respond to things. That's where we react to things, is from that portion of our brain. And it is only triggered, it can only be accessed, I should say, by our sense of smell. That's just what it is. And so when you are trying to heal from something, a trauma or a memory or what have you, and you're trying to replace it with something good and positive, a good emotion, you have to access it with your sense of smell. And here we have our essential oils, and that's how we do it. Different oils do different things. They all have similar constituents, but there's, studies have shown that lavender, for example, is very soothing. I believe it's in France or England, a hospital there, that they use it to actually calm people down.
Mm-hmm.
Here in the West, we don't really dabble much into natural health, but I know in the East for sure, and now parts of Europe, they're starting to do that. So we see that with something as simple as lavender. My word, we see it in, we've got lavender spray over at Bath and Body Works and these different things for sleep. And so it just tells you that there is something to that. There's such compelling science. And then of course the obvious, I've seen it in hundreds of people's lives, that it makes a huge difference. I've actually had men and women who have been years in therapy, talking to their therapist, trying to work through the stuff. And when they read my book, when they read that and study it, and they see, I was talking about the therapist, they start to implement these tools. All of a sudden, everything that they've been working towards in therapy is actually now healing, because they're able to release it. Just blathering on about something and talking about it doesn't help. You can journal all day long, but you have to get those emotions up and out, and you must replace it with something. You can't remove, it's like when you've ever had a scab or something, and if you picked it, well, you've peeled it off and you have like a pock mark. We have to replace it with something. Otherwise, you just have this empty void, and then those emotions are going to come flooding back, because it's what the body knows.
Mm-hmm. I've heard it to refer to almost like a sponge, right? And so the oils will help to pull out, and leave a vacancy, so that vacancy in the sponge now can be filled with the good thing that you wanted, right? And
Yes,
so you're
absolutely.
allowing to have space for what you're trying to accomplish, right? And for the good parts of your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think, and the one thing too is oils can be very unique to you. And so one oil like lavender might be really calming to some people, but then there's other people that it might do the opposite. It might energize them, right? And so
Right.
it's sometimes it's a bit of a trial and error thing, and figuring out what works for you. It's like, I never liked lavender, but I always I forced myself to use it when I started using essential oils, because I read about all these great things that it did. And so I'd put it on and I'd use it all the time. And eventually it changed, and it didn't smell yucky like it used to. It used to kind of smell, not like stinky feet, but just not
Right.
like a pretty flower. Right. And then within a couple of years or so of using it, then all of a sudden it smelled like probably what it does to everybody else, like a nice flower. Right. And then the day after my dad died, it went back to stinking like something horrific. I was just using the lavender mint shampoo, and I put it on the next morning and to have a shower, and I'm like, what is this horrible thing? And I went to the peppermint, and it smelled normal. I went to the lavender, and it smelled terrible. And I put it in my pocket, and I put it on every time I could think of. Every time I felt it in my pocket, I'd put a drop on. And it took a day to switch back, but like it just does that. And I have a few oils where it does that, where all of a sudden they just smell bad, right? And I know that there's some reason I need it then. And if I use it with intention for a few days, it goes back. And lavender, I think for me, has got, it's an emotional thing, right? It's got something to do with the emotions, because that's when it's spurred up, is when Dad died, right? And but if we're paying attention to our body and what it's telling us, it can teach us a lot, right? And it can send us in the right direction to learn more and keep diving in.
Right. And I love that you said that about lavender, because lavender is specific to the emotion of abandonment. And it's interesting to me just how your body responded to that. And that's the thing with essential oils and emotional healing, is that we don't get to choose how our body responds to events. It's not your choice. It would be so lovely if I could say, you know what, I'm actually going to choose to not be traumatized by that. But we have this beautiful thing called our subconscious that decides that for us. And so if you can understand that, okay, perhaps, I'm just going to speculate with your dad passing away, there was that little girl that's just it feels abandoned. There's no truth to that. He didn't do it on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter. And that's the thing. Our rational mind starts to say, but yeah, that's not true. It doesn't matter. Put all of the logic aside and say, but this is how I feel about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now what can we do? And I love that you said that about using lavender It does mean you need it, but there are some maybe who are listening will say, yeah, but I really like, sometimes it creates a physical response. Somebody might feel physically ill smelling it. So what I try to encourage people is, maybe if you can tolerate it, put it on the bottoms of your feet where you can't smell, right? Until your body can assimilate it again, or simply choose something else for a time and work through it, because all the oils do so many of the same things.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that they're so adaptogenic, and there's,
Yes.
you might read that one does something, but there'll be a dozen or 24 others that will help with that as well, right? There's just so many choices out there. And so, and that's the thing too. And what I love about one of the oils that you use a lot is cedarwood. And what I love about that is that cedarwood is so inexpensive. Everybody can afford cedarwood. I don't care. You can afford to buy yourself a little bottle of cedarwood to start, because it's very, very, very affordable, right? And it's amazing, and it's wonderful that it is so good at this and helping with emotions, because there's no, price is not an option on whether or not, like with frankincense, it's expensive, okay, right? Not everybody can afford that, but cedarwood is such a great place to start, because it's an inexpensive oil, and the power of it is just absolutely amazing.
It is. And I love that. That's when I realized how powerful it was, especially with emotional healing, and it's so inexpensive. I thought everyone is without excuse, because it does so many incredible things. I mean, it's remarkable.
So tell us a little bit more about your book, Jen. How do people get hold of it?
So my book is on my website, weirtexas.com. It's WEIRTX.com. And it's, under shop. And my book is actually my course in a book. And it's interesting. So the course is a 6-week program that I was using on social media. And since recent events in our world seem to be quite triggering, many people are just simply not on social media anymore. So we've put a pause in the course. And what we're doing now is we offer it as a download, and so that you can be a part of that. And we do a weekly Zoom meeting where we just basically dissect each week. So it's 6 weeks of emotional healing. We speak about affirmations, we speak about triggers, and really what is trauma, what is PTSD, everything that you and I have just discussed. And then we have the discovery process, and then we have the how to fix it, and then the walking out of it. The book, you alluded to it in there, I said, read it 3 times. And there's a reason for that. And really, truly, there's so much truth to that, what your words, and I think I probably will quote you. Someday you'll see on Instagram, Yvonne King quoted, because you're right to say it's not how many books that you read, it's how many that you study. There's so many books that are just worthy of our time and our attention to study it and really glean so much from it. People have to hear the same information 8 to 12 times before it even sticks. Mm-hmm. And it's this process of, you hear the information and it's what? Hold on. What did you say? And then you go back and you hear it again. And then you chew it over and you sort of roll it, and then you hear it another time, and it washes over you and it gets into you. And then you start processing and wondering, how will this work for me? Whatever the question is, or the topic is. And so in my book, there's a process. I ask people, just simply read it. Just read it. Don't take notes. Just read it. Let it wash over you. Let the information, though it's probably quite new, just let it get into your soul. Read it again with your journal in hand and your oils, and then start to do the work. Read it a 3rd time and see how you've healed. Now go to a deeper level. I've had people read it several times, more than 3, because they pick it up. And it's one of those resource books, right, where you go back at it and say, what was that chapter on triggers again? I'm walking through this time. Mm-hmm. And I do the same thing with my course. I ask people, please consider taking this more than once. Because at first the information, I tell you, it's a 45-minute to an hour a day study. It's a class. It's college level worthy. And you wouldn't breeze through a human anatomy class just to get the check mark if you were going to be a surgeon, right?
Mm-hmm.
I find it one of the most tragic things of our world is that we invest so heavily in college. We encourage our children to do that. And yet to study our own bodies and our own mind is just sort of happenstance. We might do that if we have the time. So I really encourage people to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do too. And bring it up a couple times a year and read it again, or, whenever you going through something, that bring up that one of those 2 chapters that made the most sense to you, because you give quite a few different ways, quite a few different techniques within the book, right? To help identify in different ways that you can clear things and work through things, I should say. Right. And so, and try them all, because one might resonate with you today and the other one might resonate with you next time, because you're going to be in a different space. Right. But we do that when we're learning too. I know I bought a lot of those like health summits and stuff like that when I was learning to heal my digestive system, and you'd watch them all, but then you should go back in like 3 months or 6 months and watch them all again, because you pick up completely different things. I know one of them I watched and I was like, why did I wait so long to watch this? I own this. Why didn't I just watch this again? Because it would have shortened my learning cycle so much, right? I wasn't ready to hear that part because I was, I had other things to worry about, but it would have shortened my learning curve a lot if I just would have, rewatched the same stuff I already owned, and actually studied that a little bit more.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Oh gosh, so much that, and that's human nature, right? And then when we think, why didn't I do this sooner?
Mm-hmm.
But there it is.
Well, and quite often we're always looking for the next thing, but we already know what to do. And I say that too is a lot with my clients, is that you already know what you need to do, right? You're just not doing it. So why aren't we doing it? And that's what we need to work on, right? But we already have all the knowledge that we need right here inside of us already, right? We just need a little help bringing that forward and putting it into practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Give yourself credit for the knowledge that you have, right?
Yeah. Well, and really, it's so intuitive. I love that you shared that about doing the mapping. We all have that intuition. It comes where we pause and then we stop and listen, really listen. Give yourself credit that you know you best and you know what to do. You just have to do it. And again, that's where my piece of the puzzle comes in, Yvonne, is that I am fully convinced that my book is the key to financial success, to business success, to marital success, to relational success, because it's the missing piece to all of those puzzles. I've taken ULA, I've done all of it's a self-help seminar. I've taken Bob Proctor's classes and all of that. I'm like, these are all incredible tools. They're missing one thing. They're missing the piece where people go from, I know this answer, I know what to do, and now I'm stuck and I don't do it. You know why? Because the emotions are holding you back. I guarantee it. I bet my paycheck on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's not that we don't have the skill set to do the things that we want to do, but for some reason we're not owning it. We're not living that dream. We're not visualizing it that way. And then when we do visualize it, how do we get past these blockages? It's like with my son, even when he was diagnosed with autism when he was younger, and all through grade school, he'd get what we call blockages, right? And somebody would just say something or do something that he couldn't get past that. He couldn't go around it and let it go. It just festered inside him all the time. And until we answered that question and overcame that block for him and cleared it for him, he wouldn't be able to function properly, right? And I think we all have that. We all have that part of it, that there's something there that's always just blocking us. It's a story that we've created inside our head, right? It's like a story with my grandpa when he passed away. It's created a story inside me that I wasn't good enough to do stuff. And it's, once you identify, it's one thing, but then now we need to clear it and create a new story in our head, right?
So powerful. I feel like you could teach my class.
Well, I really want to take your class again in the near future, because I know that I would have completely different perspective taking it now 3 years or so later, right?
Right. And it's kind of like if somebody's running, let's say I'm a runner, and so some running days are great and some days are not. And on some days I'll push myself a little further, where I used to think, wow, 4 miles was hard. And now I'll go, well, how about 5 miles? You know, you push yourself a little bit more, you get to a deeper level. And that's just in a physical sense. Imagine what we can do with our emotional mind.
Exactly. It's like when you're training, like you said, for a marathon. When I was, I trained for a half, and last year I did a half marathon, and first, when I first started running, like 4 kilometers was like, are you nuts? Like, there's no way I can, right? Next thing you know, you're running 5, and then you're running 7, and then you're running 10, then you're running 18, and then you're running 21. And all of a sudden that little 5 kilometers is the warm up on the day you're doing your muscle, your weightlifting or whatever. Right. And so it's all about perspective, right? And making those changes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And this is such an important time for people to be able to dig into this, because I know when we had, like I said, we've known each other for a few years, but we never actually met in person until March, when we were both at an event in Calgary. And we talked about, this was just all happening when things were happening in our world right before everything kind of got locked down, and how important it is for this to be known right now. And that's why I wanted to get you on the podcast right away, because this is the kind of information people really need right now. Because what we're going through with the lockdown and everything, for some people is just like PTSD, right? It could be really traumatic for some people. Maybe some others aren't, and they've been faring through it quite fine. It hasn't been a big deal. But for others, it can be a huge deal. They weren't seeing their friends anymore. They didn't have contact with people in the same way. And so we really need to identify what is bugging us, and really start looking at those emotions, and don't let it fester, because this event that is this year is just an event in our lives. But don't let this become something that's going to block you or prevent you from doing things in years to come, right?
Absolutely.
Because that's where the real tragedy would be.
Yeah. And, you said something, and I love, I feel like, Yvonne, this is like a little therapy session for me. I'm just going to be honest, because as you're talking, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's it. I have found myself feeling anger and frustration over different things. And I realized it started when we had a policeman come to our house for a reason. And he said, you know what, this is actually not a physical issue anymore, this pandemic, or the whatever you want to call it. He says, this is an emotion. No, that's not what he said. He said, this is a mental health issue now. Yeah. And I asked him to explain it. We live in the city. There's a lot of crime. I think someday I will write a book on that, just because I don't think people really understand. You have your own myopic view of where you live, right? But he said, we are seeing way more suicides, a lot of homicides. One of the boys who lives with us, their good friend, was shot over a purse. Honestly, it was the dumbest thing. Shot and killed a young kid, 19. These types of things are on the rise, more so because of the lockdown. And what is challenging is people don't know what to do with their emotions. They look to their outside circumstance, right? They don't know what it means to be their own center of support. How can I even do that? Because I'm being told I can't do this, or I have to do this. And so we don't know what to do. And then it becomes a mental health issue, and it becomes spiraling. And as I mentioned earlier, it can get to that point where life isn't worth living, or I'm so angry now I want to take someone else's life. I mean, these are serious topics, Yvonne, that are not being discussed. We're quibbling over minor pieces of fabric, when those pieces of fabric represent a mental health condition in our world.
Yeah.
And it can prevent, I hear people say, well, I would like to plan a vacation, but after all, when am I going to go? Oh my gosh, let yourself dream. Let yourself plan. Aren't you happier planning and imagining the best? Mm-hmm. So what if it doesn't happen? Who cares? Mm-hmm. I heard a pastor, teacher, whatever, say years and years ago, she said, so what if I'm believing for $1 million and I don't get it? Wasn't I happier believing that I had it than going, oh, woe was me, I'm so poor and broke? I thought, well, that's just the best advice that I ever heard in my whole life.
Yeah. 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 And that came up on one of the other podcasts is, we have the ability in our own brain to take ourselves wherever we want to go, whenever we want to go there. We are 100% control of that, right? And don't let anybody tell you you can't do that, right? Because you have that ability to go wherever you want. And so find those happy places for yourself, and dream and plan for the future. What's going on right now is just happening right now. It's a cycle in life, and it will continue, and we will all get through it. But what we want to get through it as happy as possible, and not have these things hold us back, right? And
Absolutely.
you know, it's like when my son was diagnosed with Asperger's, I refused to allow that. I didn't use the term, we live in a small town. I didn't want the diagnosis to put any kind of label on him, because I didn't want him to think he couldn't do whatever he wanted to do in life, right? And it's the same kind of thing, as we don't want to let anything hold us back from being the best that we can be. And so if that means we have to get a little help working through these things, and reach out to people, right? Reach out to, there's always someone in everybody's life that you can reach out to, and make sure they know you're struggling. You mentioned about, you know, your dad when in the military, not you know, looking for help or seeking out, right? And I think that's a man thing. Women do it too, but men are really bad at that, right? They just hold it all in, and they have to be that tough guy and suck it up princess, right? And it's okay to have emotions, right? When you get overwhelmed, you know, I think of my dad every once in a while, and I just start to cry, and that doesn't make me sad. But you have to just release it, and just accept that it's okay. For some reason, I'm triggered right now, but that's okay. It's okay to cry when I think of him. That's
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And just let it go, so that you can move through it, right? Don't hold it up. Don't put a barrier on it.
Yes. And tears are soap for the soul, I heard someone say.
Oh, that's a good one.
And it's, for whatever reason, we don't believe that we're allowed to have that soap. And it's so healing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for joining us today, Jen. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you,
And
Yvonne.
I hope that today's podcast gives some hope to people, and gives them some tools. And so do a little looking. Take a look at Jen's book. It's very affordable. It's an easy read, and it's a great one to I very encourage people, if you are an oil user already, when you order Jen's book, maybe you might want to consider getting two, so that you can keep one for yourself and read it through 3 times at least, like Jen suggests, but give it to a friend who you know needs a little help, right? And if they're having a struggle, even if it's one that you have and you loan it out, and then they bring it back when they're done using it, and then loan it up to another one. I have a good friend, actually, you know her as well, Amanda Yerby. She gave me a copy of her book one time, and she called it a legacy book. And her point was that you read it, and then when you're done with it, pass it on to somebody else. And I think this is another book that would be awesome to have as a legacy book, where you know, use it, let it help you, and then when you don't think you need it anymore, then pass it on to somebody else, because there's so many people in the world that need help with this. And it's not an easy answer, but the answer is simple, but it's not easy. Right? And we have that in so many lives. The same thing when you're trying to lose weight. The answer is easy. We know what we need to do, but it doesn't make it easy to do, right? It's a simple answer, but it's not easy to implement. But you can do it. You just have to make a time commitment and a commitment to yourself, and know that you are worthy of this, right? You are worthy of working through whatever it is that's holding you back, so you can move forward and have a happier life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for all of that. It's incredible to hear you to speak about the book as a legacy book. To say I'm humbled is a gross understatement. So thank you. I appreciate you so much.
Well, I appreciate you. So grateful to have you in my life. And like I said, you came in right at that time when we did our program, was right around the time before or after Dad passed away. I don't remember what it was, but it was a time when I was going through a lot of emotional trauma, I guess, though I never really identified it as that, right? And it really helped me a lot. And I know that you have the power to help so many other people. So thanks for joining us today, and such a pleasure. And again, it's Jen Weir TX.com, right?
It's Weir Texas.
Weir Texas.
Yes.
Right. Sorry.
Yes.
So I'll put that in the show notes if you're listening to the podcast. If you go to YvonneKing.ca, the show notes for this episode, we'll have the link there too, so you get the right connection with Jen. And please go and check her out and follow her on Instagram. You're on Facebook too, right, Jen?
Yes. Yes, I am.
So we'll put those links up in the show notes too. So if people want to follow and learn and learn from your guidance, then they'll be able to easily find those things. So thanks again for joining us today. And I really appreciate that you took the time to spend with us today.
Anytime. Take care.
So you've been listening to Follow Your Gut with Yvonne King. And that was my guest, Jen Weir. I hope that you enjoyed that conversation. I know I certainly did. And just to follow up, Jen's website is Weir, WEIRTX.com. And of course, you can go to my website, yvonneking.ca/podcast, or click on the podcast icon and it'll take you to all the episodes in the podcast. And you can find this episode with the show notes and all of the links and connections to connect up with Jen. Remember to join us at yvonneking.ca/podcast to find all the information about how to connect with today's guests, as well as our show notes. And if you are listening on the podcast, you will find the YouTube link, and vice versa. If you're listening to it on YouTube, you will find the podcast link. So you can make it easy for you to watch it in whichever format you prefer, and as well to share with anybody you think might benefit from this information. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you next week. It is a busy week here on the podcast with Super Launch Week, but it's also a really busy week in my Facebook group. If you're not a member of the group yet, please go and look it up and ask to join. We are happy to have you. The group's name is called Follow Your Gut, Protect Your Gut, and Look for the Root Cause of Your Health. This week, we are doing a pantry renovation challenge. So every day I jump in, give a short little lesson and a challenge for you. At the end of the week, we hope you will have your pantry all cleaned out, remove the foods that are expired, and the foods that you know you really shouldn't be eating. It's so much easier to stick to a program if you don't have that temptation teasing you all the time from your pantry. So maybe it's a better idea to just get it out of the house altogether. If it's not in the house, then you won't eat it. At 8 o'clock at night, you ain't going to go running uptown to go buy yourself a bag of chips. But if it's downstairs in the pantry, you just might cave and go and do it. So we'll also learn about how to read food labels and make good, better, best type decisions where, it's hard to make changes. But if we can make small changes every day, then we will probably have a better success and a more lasting success than if we just go cold turkey on everything. Everybody's different. Some people do amazing at cold turkey, but most of us don't. And so how can we make good choices every day to help make better health for us overall? It's going to be a fantastic week. Come ahead and join us for that. Click on the links and then get your workbook downloaded so that we can start with that on Monday the 6th. And if you are listening to this after the 6th, that's okay. You can catch up. It's not that difficult. So just send me a message and we'll get you added to the group so you can be part of the pantry renovation challenge as well. Have a great day.